Hello, everyone. My name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about learning how to read and write, written by Frederick Douglass. Now, before I go into the summary analysis of this work, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and/or comment so that the channel can continue to grow. Now, this work by Frederick Douglass teaches us a lot about slavery and what slaves went through during the time of slavery. Now, around the world, slavery still exists. There's slavery exists in a lot of places. And the same tactics that are used within this essay to keep slaves away from reading and away from learning about where they are and what they are to their masters are used in this essay and are used today. Now, the essay begins with Frederick Douglass learning how to read by Sophia. Sophia is his master's wife. And at first, Sophia is this kind woman, this kind lady that she's nice to everybody. She's just a welcoming person. But throughout the essay, she just becomes this unkind and ruthless individual. First she taught Frederick how to read the alphabet or understand the alphabet, and then her husband pretty much tells her she can't do that anymore, and it's dangerous to teach slaves to read. And that is true. When you teach slaves how to read, it's bad for business. It's bad for the master. But for the slave, it's a way out of slavery, because when you can't read, when you're not literate, you can't understand what you are to the master, what you can do to break the bonds of slavery. And a lot of slaves, because of the fact they couldn't read, they didn't know anything about abolitionist movements. They didn't know anything about that. There's certain countries where they would be free and be actual citizens. They didn't know things about human rights and all that kind of stuff. They didn't know that other countries valued their lives. So reading was a very dangerous thing. And when Frederick Douglass learns how to read, it's a good and bad thing. So Sophia, she tries to keep Frederick Douglass away from reading, but there's this famous phrase that appears within this essay that says, if you give someone an inch, they'll take an L. And basically, Sophia gives Frederick that inch, and he definitely takes the L. And what happens is she tried all that she can. Whenever she saw Frederick reading or doing anything that involves being literate, that involves writing, and she would quickly take that away from him or push him towards physical labor rather than trying to exercise his mind and becoming literate. She just didn't want that to happen. Her husband didn't want that to happen because as soon as you give a slave the ability to read, they're going to learn things that you don't want them to learn about. So Frederick, now since Sophia won't teach him how to read, he basically teaches himself. So he tricks kids in his neighborhood, poor white kids in his neighborhood that are going to school. He gives them bread. He finds different games and different ways to make them play with him, and he creates these games where they would teach him about letters. He would make them write letters and have like letter writing competition. So he said, I'll write this, let me see if you can write better. I'll write these letters, let me see if you can write better. And through games like that, Frederick Douglass learns how to read, he learns how to write, and then after he gets a grasp of that, the sad thing that happens is he learns about his plight in life. Now, reading literature or reading of any kind is very beneficial. You can learn a lot about different things of the world through literature, through in a library. Literature, books, it's very important to understand the world around you, and even your own identity. It's something you can understand through books and literature. And Frederick Douglass, after learning how to read and write, he really learns what it means to be a slave. Now, yes, on a daily basis, he knew what being a slave meant. His freedoms were taken away. He had to follow orders. But the thing is, if you're born into slavery, you might think it's normal. If you're born into slavery, you might think that the masters or the white people are these separate people, that they're not part of the human race, and that you just exist to serve them. Now, a lot of slaves who were born into slavery and not brought over from another country, they might have thought that, maybe this is my place in life, and some of them might have accepted that they were supposed to be slaves. Now, learning how to read and write, you can read the literature, and that's what Frederick Douglass, this is what he does. He reads the literature and he learns that slavery is not a good thing. Slavery is something that pretty much ruins your life. You'll never get freedom. Your kids will never get freedom. You'll never get to be your own man. And he kind of complains and tells the poor white boys in his neighborhood or around the plantation, and kind of tells them that, you guys will be free as soon as you turn 21. I will never be free. I will always be a slave. I will always be, next in line to be sold to the highest bidder. And he starts to realize his plight in life. He starts to realize that he's a slave. He starts to realize that being a slave is not just taking orders. It's being someone's property. It's being someone's object, and that you can never be an actual human being. And he goes on this like internal monologue, and he starts to talk to himself. Where he even says that, it's better to be dead than to be a slave. It's better to not exist than to be a slave. And this is where the phrase "ignorance is bliss" comes in. In many ways, when you read a lot of books, you read a lot of texts, and you learn more and more about the world, ignorance, it becomes bliss, because the more you know about what you are, who you are, and what you represent to other people, you start to understand that you're trapped in a place. And this, for certain people, for Frederick Douglass especially, when he learns of his plight in life, when he learns that he can never escape, when he learns that he can never be anything better, this darkness, this melancholy state falls upon him, and he's like, what am I going to do? I can't live like this forever. And he even wishes to never, to be like one of the other slaves, because at least the other slaves don't know, what they are to these people. At least the other slaves are still encased in ignorance, and the ignorance is somewhat protecting them. But me, I know that I'm a slave. I know what I represent to these people. I know that I can be killed without a second thought. I know that I can be sold without a second thought. And the other thing is, he learns about the abolitionist movement, and now he wants to be a part of it. And whenever he hears about escape, whenever he hears about going north, whenever he hears about there's a way out, he starts to think a little bit about freedom. He starts to think a little bit, maybe I can make it out of this, but it starts to become a risky business, because now he's thinking about escape. He's thinking about freedom. And this is the thing that his masters did not want him to know about. This is the thing that his masters did not want to face. So now at 12 years old, this kid is thinking about freedom. He's thinking about having rights. He's thinking about being his own man, and he's thinking about putting his life on the line, because if you're thinking about freedom, you can be killed. If you're a person that could spread rumors and ideas about how to escape the plantation and escape the South, you could be killed. So, this 12-year-old kid at his young life as a slave, learning how to read and write, pretty much puts him in a place where, he puts a lot of weight on his shoulders. And he has to look at the world a different way, which is very deadly. And it's a lot to put on a 12-year-old to start planning, to start thinking about escape, and to start thinking about freedom. In terms of analysis, in terms of a deeper meaning here, towards the end, we kind of see a little bit victory for Frederick Douglass, because even though Sophia didn't want him to learn how to read and write, he learns how to read and write because he teaches himself. And the other thing is, he copies the work of Sophia's son. When he leaves his books around, when he leaves his stuff around Frederick Douglass, he copies and teaches himself how to write, and he even does it better than his little master. So that's a little victory for him there. And so even though that Sophia and his main master didn't want him to become smart, to learn how to read and write, he eventually he achieves this. And the other thing is, I think it's quite significant that he was a house slave, because if he wasn't a house slave, this would have never happened. And so he definitely takes the L. Give a slave an inch, give somebody an inch, then they'll take the L. Frederick Douglass, he takes an L and more, because he not only frees himself, but later in his life and in the book that this excerpt comes from, he frees a lot of people, and he writes a lot of literature that shows and depicts what it means to be black, what it means to escape from slavery, and to be a human being. So that's what's quite significant about this. Now, for most people, learning how to read and write, it's just something that you go to school and do. Most people in most countries around the world, you don't think that much about learning how to read and write, because it's something that you just do every day. You go to school, you learn how to read and write. But the thing is, like, a lot of people, especially in the black community and other communities around the world, they had to fight for that right, the right to learn how to read and write, the right for education, the right to know who you are and to forge your own path in this world. So it's a lot of things that people take for granted today, that were not free, that were not a given. So that's what's really significant about this. And also, literature is something that you can enjoy. That's another thing that I personally get from this work, is that yes, literature is something that you can enjoy, something that can help you grow in life. But at the same time, the more you read, the more you learn about the world around you, and read different perspectives from different people about the world around them, the more the world becomes heavy, because this essay kind of proves how ignorance can be bliss sometimes, and it can protect you. It can be like a casing against the darkness and the horrors that exist in the world. So that's my summary and analysis of Learning How to Read and Write by Frederick Douglass. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and/or comment, and I'll see you guys in my next video.